Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our annual memorial in honor of George Frisbie Hoar and to celebrate the Senator's 196th birthday. We're honored to have with us Richard and Rob of the George Frisbie Hoar Appreciation Society based in Concord. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rob and Richard, who will give us a brief history of the four Hoar families' importance to Concord and to America. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Morrison. I'm a teacher at the Fenn School. I'm a history teacher. I teach middle school, 6th and 7th grade boys. And we did a project about George Frisbie Hoar 12 years ago, so we learned a bit about his family. I'll tell you a little bit about his family first. His family goes way back to the settling of Concord. John Hoar was originally defender of the Native American people here in Concord. George Frisbie Hoar's grandfather was a signer of the Declaration of Independence and of the Constitution. His father was a U.S. representative in the House of Representatives, and he was a central person in the town of Concord. His mother, Sarah, was founder of the Concord Female Anti-Slavery Society, and his sister was also a founding member of that society. And his brother was the Attorney General of the United States, Ebenezer Rockwood. George Frisbie Hoar was selected as a senator back in 1877, and he was re-selected 5 times. Back then it was you were selected by the Senate of Massachusetts. It wasn't a direct election. People didn't elect their senators. But George Frisbie Hoar, well, I'll pass it over to Richard to tell a little bit more about George Frisbie Hoar's life.
My name is Richard Smith. I am a Concord historian, and it's a pleasure to be here today. In the 19th century, nothing could be done in Concord without the Hoars being involved. They were called the Royal Family of Concord. And everybody pretty much knew that if there was something going on in town, whether it was politically, culturally, in terms of progressive ideas, the Hoars were usually the family that was involved. As Rob mentioned, one of the Hoars, the grandfather, was involved in helping protect the Native Americans in the area during the time of King Philip's War. They were also abolitionists, meaning that they were fighting to end slavery. And of course, George Frisbie Hoar himself was the only senator to vote against the Chinese Exclusion Act. And if you're in Concord, you're probably not surprised by that, because everybody knows that the Hoars were an incredibly progressive family. They were involved with so many causes to make sure that the country really believed in the ideal that all men are created equal. At a time when it was mostly the white men who were considered equal, the Hoars stood up for Native Americans, African Americans, and Chinese Americans as well. So that's why we are here to honor Senator Hoar for being the only man in the Senate, and he was highly ridiculed for it, voting against the Chinese Exclusion Act. And I'm going to pass it on now to the next speaker.
Hello everyone, my name is Helen Yang. I am with the Asian Americans for Equal Rights and the Chinese Americans of Lexington, also known as KLEX. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here and for Wilson Esther for organizing this. I first heard about Senator George Hoar from last year during the Asian American Heritage Month. During that month, Esther and Wilson organized daily webinars, and I attended some of the webinars, including this one on the Chinese Exclusion Act by Attorney Martin Gold. So I expected it to be a depressing subject, but it turned out to be very uplifting. Many of us know that the President Arthur signed the Chinese Exclusion Act into law in 1882. What I did not know until that night was that he actually vetoed the act twice, and before he yielded to the pressure but not without getting a concession from the proponents to reduce it from 20 years to 10 years. So the bill was then renewed 10 years later in 1892, and then was up for vote again to be renewed in 1902. That's when Senator George Hoar was the only person in the Senate who voted no on the bill. And he said, "I hold that every human soul has its rights, dependent upon individual personal worth, and not dependent upon color and race. As this bill violates that principle, I am bound to record my protest if I stand alone." Before him, many others opposed the bill. In 1882, when the bill was first introduced and voted in the House, Representative William Rice, also of Massachusetts, said, "Against this bill as it now stands, I can only utter my final protest and say that I know it must fail because of all the principles of justice and of equity. Fight against it." It is people like Senator George Hoar who uphold the principles that made us the free country it is today. And on behalf of myself and everybody who have benefited from this, I wanted to say thank you to Senator George Hoar and the family that brought him up to uphold those kind of principles, so to make this country the beautiful place that we live today. Thank you all.
Hi, I'm Melanie Lin. I'm the co-president of Chinese American Association of Lexington. And today we stand in front of the tomb of Senator Hoar, a man with the character and integrity. And 150 some years ago, and he fight the injustice and inequality, and that is against his belief, right? So he really, in the time when the racial bigotry and also slavery was the norm, and he showed a great compassion to disadvantaged the African Americans, the Asian Americans, Chinese at the time, and against the Chinese Exclusion Act. It's very important for us to learn this part of the history, his story, Chinese American story, because the Chinese American history is American history, and so we want to educate. We want to promote education. That's why we want to install the API history curriculum into the school, so that we can all learn, because those experiences that Chinese experienced are still relevant to today in the context of stop the Asian hate, and in the context of the tension between U.S. and China. And so we believe education is a way to overcome people's bias and for us to understand each other. And teaching history is the best way to build a better future.
Good afternoon. My name is Sophia Ho from Lexington. I'm a member of CAL, Chinese American Association of Lexington, which was established since 1983. I'm ashamed to admit that I have not heard anything about Senator Hoar until today, but after I learned what he did, he has my respect, admiration. This is a man with integrity, even though he was voted down. But look around now, today, people followed his spirit. People knew he was doing the right thing. So I am very happy to be here to learn more about the senator and to know that there is appreciation community in Concord for Senator Hoar. On a more personal note, the senator was born on August 29th, 1826. I was born 101 years later. On the same day, I feel honored. I feel honored. We love you, Senator.
Thank you. So we're really honored to have with us today the former city council member from West Lynn, which is a suburb of Portland, Oregon. and she's here with her family, and also her daughter Summer actually is a freshman at Harvard, which is where all the Hoar family members all attended college, and Hoar obviously attended Harvard Law School as well. So without further ado, the Honorable Jennifer Tang.
Yes, my name is Jenny Tan, and truly this is an honor and privilege to be here speaking to you all. And thank you so much, Esther and Wilson, for planning this program. And I too, like Sophia, I did not know about this incredible man until recently when we were here to drop off my daughter. And then I heard about him, and I was like, absolutely, my family would love to come and attend his anniversary of his birthday. And I read up more about him, and I was so impressed and so amazed that this man did something that was so unpopular at that time, as the gentleman mentioned, was ridiculed for being the only dissenting vote against the Chinese Exclusionary Act. And he said at that time that the Chinese Exclusionary Act was basically a legalized racial discrimination. And I can't think of, even now to this day, it's so important that we need to learn from our history so it doesn't repeat itself, and we need to be aware. And so I am so honored to be here, and like I mentioned, I'm so impressed too about what I read about him. He was an activist for Native Americans and for African Americans. He was one of the first people that was talking about women's right to vote. So this man was truly progressive and ahead of his time, and fought for the rights of all people, no matter what color, what gender. So thank you again for this privilege, and for allowing us to learn and to spread this word about this great man and his family.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Jennifer. And we have a student from Amherst College, Jaja. She wants to say a few words. Come on up.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Jaja, or Jaja. I recently graduated from Amherst College, where I studied Asian American history, and right now I'm a master's student at Oxford, where I'm researching transatlantic Chinese exclusion. I want to thank Wilson for inviting me, and also my professor and mentor, Franklin Odo, who allowed me the privilege of reading the congressional debates over Chinese exclusion in its entirety several years ago, and it's because of him that I wholeheartedly remember the name George Hoar, because when I was reading those debates, I noticed that in the initial round of Chinese exclusion, which was the first Chinese Exclusion Act, was passed in 1882, and there were a very small number of congressmen at that time who voted against it. But if you actually read what they said, most of them gave reasons that were economic or political, and it stuck out to me that Senator Hoar was the only one who gave a staunchly moral reason throughout, and even though they're called the Chinese Exclusion Acts, these acts were actually, in truth, a series of acts that were extended over and over again, and debated over and over again throughout American history, for extension to additional groups of Chinese people, additional industries, additional classes, and additional American states and territories. And it was only Senator Hoar who, throughout each of those extensions, voted against it, always for a moral reason. And even though the acts were initially called, they were not initially called the Chinese Exclusion Acts, they were initially called an act to carry out certain treaty stipulations with China. And that's because a lot of our American lawmakers at the time tried to cloak it as an act to protect economic, the economic state of the United States, to protect workers, to protect this and that. But Senator Hoar very pointedly said it was nothing more than an attempt to legalize racial discrimination. So I think it's important to remember that.
Thank you, thank you. We say the best for last. We're really honored to have with us May Wong, the Executive Director of the Chinese Cultural Connection, who's been around for a really long time. She's an incredibly respected leader. Come on up, May. Why don't you say a few words? Share your wisdom with our audience. This is going to be broadcast live to millions of people around the world.
Wow. I apologize for being late here. I went to the wrong place. So, regardless, I'm very honored. My name is Mei Hong, the Executive Director of the Chinese Cultural Connection. That we are located in Morton. And on behalf of the Chinese immigrant community in Morton and then the rest of our collaborating groups, I feel very honored to be part of this honoring event. because again, like many of you, today is also my first time learning about Senator Hoar, about his act, and I feel that all the things that he had done for us, it's incredible, a great leader for us to follow. And me being a immigrant myself, and I have experienced the firsthand of the challenges of being an immigrant. And of course, recently we all have witnessed the anti-Asian sentiment, that this really suggests that even though we have come a long way, we still have a long way to go. And I feel that collectively that this is a great educational experience for us, so that we want to make sure that we are educating our community members to be informed voters, to be able to educate our not only community members about how we can elect a person who is actually a public servant, who is providing their service or policy is for the public interest. And I believe that a policy can impact our lives, the quality of our lives really incredibly. And so we actually have the power to do so, and yet we sometimes did not really consider selecting or electing the right candidate or right politician to support us is a good thing to do, or is an important thing to do. So I feel today this is a great beginning for us to consider how we can educate our community and become more civically involved and engaged, so that we can have a equality and justice for all. Thank you.
Actually, the United States of America had a treaty with China. It's called the Burning Game Treaty. And it was written by the former ambassador to China, a former state representative of his former congressman of Massachusetts, who's buried at the Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge. And when he resigned from his post as the U.S. ambassador to China, the Chinese government hired him to be their ambassador, and he was the ambassador extraordinaire, which meant that he represented China not just to the United States, but to the European power. So the treaty that he negotiated with between U.S. and China was the first treaty between a Western power that treated China as an equal nation status. And that treaty actually allowed free movement between the two countries of its citizens. So the Chinese Exclusion Act actually would have been in violation of that treaty. So they had to do all sorts of reneging and all sorts of amendment to get this Chinese Exclusion Act 1882 passed. I just want to take a minute to thank Martin Go, who were instrumental in getting the expression of regret from Congress. I think this is about almost 10 years ago for the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. And the lead sponsor in the Senate actually was our own Scott Brown of Massachusetts. So Scott Brown of Massachusetts was the senator that led the effort in the Senate, and Judy Chu of California, she led the effort in the House. So about 10 years ago, we had the expression of regret. It was not an apology, because if they apologized, there would be legal and possibly financial consequences. So instead of getting a full-fledged apology, it was an expression of regret. So I just want to thank Congresswoman Judy Chu and Senator Scott Brown. Last but not least, I would like to ask Esther Lee, the president and chair of the Chinese American Heritage Foundation, to say a few closing words and thank our participants.
Well, I just want to thank you everyone for coming. This is a very important day, and I just want to say that when CACA Boston rechartered in 2014, the following 2 years we have a gala, and to honor George Frisbie Hoar, we actually have an award, which is given to a lot of elected officials, and we have done about, is it 2 years already, but because of the pandemic, 3 years, and pandemic we stopped. So this year in October, we're going to have another gala, and we're going to have George Frisbie Hoar award again to honor different elected officials. So we'll be sending out invitation to you all, and thank you again for coming. And I think we have some small ceremony we want to do right now to presenting some flowers. So I'll have Wilson take over.
Okay. So let's say we'll just do 3 bows, and then we'll present the flower to him. So first bow, second bow, and third bow. Thank you. We'll present the flowers to him. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. We'll stand like this.
Wrong side.
So there's a Chinese Chinese saying, 廣東話 is called 唔好忘恩負義. Can someone say 忘恩負義 in Chinese, in Mandarin?
忘恩负义。
忘恩負義.
忘恩负义。
Yeah, yeah, you can say it.
忘恩负义不对啊。
Not the right way to say.
唔係忘恩負義.
忘恩負義 that means that you are resentful to something.
唔好忘恩負義.
不要忘恩負義。
不要忘恩負義. Okay.
不要忘恩负义，不要忘恩负义。
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean. No, that's what I mean. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm right. I'm okay.
不要忘恩负义
Yeah,
就对了。
So, I'm sorry. So, my, ABCs, ABCs, our Chinese is not that good. So actually, what I'm trying to say is that there's a Cantonese expression that we cannot 唔可以忘恩負義, which basically means that we cannot forget people who have helped us along our journey. So that's why we are here today, to remember, honor, and pay respect to Senator George Frisbie Hoar. So that we want to make sure that the younger generation, especially young people like Jared, Summer, Jaja, and others, know that even though they're incredibly successful students and they're going to have a great future, but it's individuals like George Frisbie Hoar who pave the paths so that we can all have a better future. So God bless you, Senator Hoar. We're really happy to be here. We look forward to celebrating your big 200th birthday in 4 years.
I have no faith in fatalism, in destiny, in blind force. I believe in God, the living God. I believe in the American people, a free and brave people who do not bow the neck or bend the knee to any other, and who desire no other to bow the neck or bend the knee to them. I believe that a republic is greater than an empire. I believe, finally, whatever clouds may darken the horizon, that the world is growing better, that today is better than yesterday, and that tomorrow will be better than today.
That sounded like George Frisbie Hoar was responding to our presence here today. It really sounded like he was talking to us, so really, thank you, George. If I may call you George, on a first name basis, thank you.
Okay, picture.
Cheese! Dim sum!
George Ford.
All right, I took some.